Why does Uncle Chris sleep in your room when you travel? My daughter asked, her voice echoing through the kitchen. And in that moment, every hidden truth I'd ignored finally rose to the surface. God, where do I even begin? It feels like my entire life, everything I thought was true, just shattered into a million tiny pieces, and I'm standing here barefoot on the shards. I'm Juliana, 36, and up until recently, I genuinely believed I had it all. A pretty good life, you know? I'm a language teacher, which I love, but it does mean I'm often away from home, traveling for school trips or exchange programs. Our apartment, a noisy fourth-floor place in Valencia, used to feel like my absolute sanctuary. From our balcony, I could hear the constant, comforting hum of the city, kids shrieking with laughter in the plaza below, the rhythmic clatter of coffee cups from the cafe on the corner, and the old men, bless them, debating football with passionate hand gestures that you could practically feel through the floorboards. It was idyllic, truly. I'd come home after a week in some quiet village, and the vibrant chaos of Valencia would just wash over me, a warm, familiar embrace. And then there was Sergio, my husband. He was everything. Or at least I thought he was. To the outside world, to our friends, to my family, he was the absolute epitome of the perfect family man. Charming, effortlessly so, with that easy smile that seemed to light up any room he walked into. He was attentive, remembering every anniversary, every little detail about my day, or so I believed. Publicly, he'd dote on Alba, our daughter, always ready with a playful tickle or a patient answer to her endless why questions. Everyone adored him. My sister would joke that I'd won the husband lottery. I felt it too. That deep, satisfying hum of contentment, the kind you get when you genuinely feel blessed. I trusted him with my whole heart, every fiber of my being. He was my rock, my partner, the anchor in my sometimes hectic life. And then there was Christian, or Uncle Chris, as Alba affectionately called him. Chris was Sergio's best friend, had been since they were practically kids, and he'd been a constant, unwavering presence in our lives for years. He was practically part of the furniture, a familiar, comfortable fixture. He'd often be around when I was home, sharing a beer on the balcony, joining us for Sunday paella, always making Alba giggle with his silly voices. But it was when I was away that his presence really ramped up. He'd always be there to help out, Sergio would say. Babysitting Alba, running errands, supposedly just keeping Sergio company. I thought of it as a blessing, honestly. A supportive network for my family while I was off teaching verbs and tenses in another town. I never, not once, questioned it. I saw it as a testament to Sergio's kindness, to their unbreakable friendship. Little did I know, he'd moved into more than just our lives. He'd moved into my bedroom, my bed, my entire existence, and I was too blind, too trusting, to even see it happening. The thought sends a cold shiver down my spine even now, thinking back to how naive I was. Looking back now, with the clarity of 1,000 shattered pieces, it's like a cruel, twisted movie playing on repeat in my head. Every single sign, every red flag I diligently ignored, flashes before my eyes, mocking my past self. How could I have been so unbelievably blind, so utterly, stupidly trusting? There were so many moments. So many. It wasn't just a casual "Chris is around if you need him." It was almost an insistent declaration from Sergio. "Chris will stay over," he'd state, not ask, especially when my work trips stretched beyond a few days. The longer the trip, the more urgent his tone became. The more he emphasized how helpful it would be to have Chris around for Alba and for company. I'd be packing, my mind already on lesson plans and flight schedules, and he'd be there, casually dropping it into conversation, almost like an afterthought, but with a firmness that left no room for discussion. I remember one time he actually said, "It's important for Alba to have a male presence when you're not here, you know?" And I, like the naive fool I was, thought, "Ah, he's thinking of our daughter." And the phone. God, the phone. I'd occasionally wake up in the dead of night, needing to use the bathroom, and see Sergio's phone screen glowing, his thumbs flying across the keyboard with an almost frantic energy. He'd be lying on his side, back to me, the light casting a ghostly glow on his face. When he sensed me stir, or if I accidentally made a sound, he'd snap the screen off so fast, the sudden darkness felt like a physical recoil. Always, always. Just work stuff, or talking to Chris about football. He'd mumble it without turning around, his voice a little too quick, a little too dismissive. I'd feel a prickle of unease, a tiny pinprick of suspicion, but I'd shake it off, blaming it on my own exhaustion or the weirdness of being half asleep. And Chris. Sometimes, when Sergio wasn't looking directly at him, or when he thought I wasn't paying attention, Chris's gaze would linger on Sergio for a beat too long. A warmth, a possessiveness, a subtle shift in his expression that I just filed away as best friend affection. I'd see them on the sofa, sometimes their knees almost touching, or Chris would casually rest a hand on Sergio's shoulder for a fraction of a second more than felt. Normal for two straight men. My brain, bless its stupid, loyal heart, just filed it under European male affection, because, men here are more openly affectionate. I convinced myself I was just being culturally insensitive. Then there were the times I did voice my fleeting discomfort. I remember one evening I'd just gotten back from a week-long exchange in Seville, utterly exhausted but also just feeling a bit off. Chris had been over almost every night, according to Sergio. I was unpacking, and I just casually mentioned, "Chris seems to be around a lot when I'm gone, doesn't he?" Sergio, who was scrolling through his phone, actually laughed. Not a gentle chuckle, but a dismissive, almost mocking sound that made my chest tighten. He rolled his eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck in his head. "Juliana, you're being ridiculous. He's my best friend. He's helping us out. You're so paranoid sometimes." And then came the classic, the ultimate gaslighting weapon. "Are you jealous of Chris? Seriously? You're being irrational, babe." That word, irrational. It always got to me. It's like a switch, designed to make you question your own sanity, to doubt your own instincts. He'd make me feel like the stupidest, most insecure woman on the planet for even thinking such a thing. My stomach would twist into cold knots of shame, and a hot flush would creep up my neck. I hated feeling like that. I prided myself on being logical, grounded, and here he was, painting me as some hysterical, jealous wife. So I pushed those thoughts down. Deep, deep down, until they festered in some dark corner of my mind. Every flicker of unease, every raised eyebrow, every time I saw a text pop up from Chris late at night, I'd rationalize it away. "They're just close. It's a guy thing. I'm just tired, stressed, overthinking." I wanted to trust them. I wanted to believe in the perfect family, the perfect husband, the perfect friendship. It was easier, less painful, to believe the lie than to even entertain the possibility of the truth. My trust wasn't just blind. It felt like it had been surgically removed and replaced with a stubborn, self-deceiving optimism. And every time I squashed those feelings, a little piece of my intuition died. I silenced my own gut, for them, for the illusion they were so carefully crafting. The weight of that self-betrayal is almost as heavy as the actual betrayal itself now. It was a Saturday morning. God, how I used to love Saturdays. This one in particular should have been perfect. The first one back home after a week-long school trip to Galicia, teaching Spanish to a group of enthusiastic but utterly chaotic teenagers. I was still shaking off the travel fatigue, but the sound of Alba's bright, energetic voice was like a jolt of pure caffeine. I was in the kitchen, humming along to some cheesy pop song on the radio, flipping pancakes. The smell of cinnamon and coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint, sweet scent of Alba's strawberry shampoo. She was perched on her usual stool at the breakfast bar, diligently working her way through a bowl of cereal, milk dripping from the corner of her mouth as she recounted some elaborate dream about a flying cat. Her tiny hand, sticky with milk, gestured wildly as she spoke, her blue eyes wide with innocent wonder. Sergio was there too, leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone, a half-smile playing on his lips, occasionally interjecting with a mm-hmm or a soft chuckle. It felt normal. So perfectly, beautifully normal. A scene I'd pictured 100 times during my lonely evenings away. Then she looked up at me, cereal spoon halfway to her mouth, her gaze utterly earnest and direct. "Mommy?" she began, her voice a little softer now, as if sharing a whispered confidence. "Why does Uncle Chris sleep in your room when you travel?" "He always closes the door and says it's a secret game." The world just stopped. The pancake in my hand, ready to be flipped, felt impossibly heavy. The spatula clattered against the pan, a metallic screech that seemed to echo in the sudden ringing silence. My heart, which had been beating a happy, steady rhythm just moments before, lurched violently in my chest, then seemed to stop altogether. I swear I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving my skin cold and clammy, a sudden chill despite the warmth of the kitchen. My hands started to tremble, a frantic, uncontrollable tremor. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sergio, who had been lazily scrolling, jerk upright. The ceramic plate he was holding, probably for his own breakfast, slipped from his numb fingers and hit the tiled floor with a sickening, shattering crash. The sound was deafening, yet it barely registered through the roaring in my ears. My stomach clenched into a cold, hard knot, twisting painfully, as if someone had just punched me, hard, right in the gut. My mind, in that split second of horrifying silence, raced to the absolute worst possible place. Secret game? Closed door? My daughter? No. Oh God, no. Not Chris. Not Sergio. Not with Alba. The fear that gripped me was primal, suffocating, a black wave of pure terror that threatened to swallow me whole. My throat felt like it was closing up, words trapped, suffocated. Alba, oblivious to the catastrophe she'd just unleashed, frowned slightly at the plate on the floor, then looked back at me, her brow furrowed with concern at my sudden, deathly pallor. "They just watch movies and talk and sometimes sleep late," she quickly clarified, her innocent voice a balm and a fresh wound all at once. "And sometimes they eat ice cream in bed. Daddy says it's our special secret." The terror, that immediate, gut-wrenching, terrifying fear for my daughter, subsided. It receded like a tide. But it didn't leave emptiness. Instead, it was replaced by a wave of something much, much darker, colder, and infinitely more insidious. The air in my lungs, which had been painfully scarce, rushed back in, but it felt like shards of glass. So, while I was away, busting my ass, missing my family, my husband and his best friend, were not only locking themselves in my room, but they were doing it in my bed, the bed I shared with my husband, while our daughter slept just down the hall, completely unaware of the desecration happening steps away. They watch movies, they talk, they eat ice cream in bed. My bed. Our bed. The phrase secret game took on a whole new chilling meaning. It wasn't about Alba's safety, but about their clandestine activities, hidden from me. The sheer audacity, the sickening casualness of it, twisted my insides into an even tighter knot. That afternoon, as if the universe decided I hadn't had enough, as if it needed to hammer home the final, undeniable nail into the coffin of my marriage, I went to change the sheets. It was a chore I usually enjoyed, the fresh scent of clean laundry, the crisp feel of new sheets. But today, it felt like a morbid ritual. My movements were automatic, my mind still reeling from Alba's words. I stripped the pillows, then pulled back the duvet, and there, crumpled carelessly among the blankets, almost mocking me, was a t-shirt that was definitely not Sergio's. It was Chris's. His favorite band. Some indie Spanish rock group I couldn't stand, emblazoned on the front. I'd seen him wear it 100 times. The fabric felt soft, still faintly carrying the scent of his cologne, a scent I now associated with betrayal. That t-shirt, lying there like a piece of irrefutable physical evidence, combined with Alba's innocent question, ripped off whatever blindfold I had stubbornly, desperately clung to for years. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't irrational jealousy. It was real. It was tangible. It was right there, in my hands, in my bed. The perfect little Valencia life I'd so lovingly curated. The husband I adored, the friendship I cherished, all of it, every single bit, was a meticulously crafted lie. And I had been living inside it, breathing it, believing it, until a 6-year-old and a crumpled piece of fabric exposed the rotting core. The air caught in my throat, a dry, choked sob that never fully escaped. I just stood there, holding that shirt, the weight of the world pressing down on me. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a cold, terrifying clarity. My life would never be the same. I didn't scream. I didn't shout. I didn't even cry. Not a single tear. It felt like all the emotion had been sucked out of me, leaving behind a hollow, icy core where my heart used to be. The t-shirt, still clutched in my trembling hands, felt like a burning brand, yet my skin was impossibly cold. The shattered plate on the kitchen floor still lay there, a stark, jagged symbol of the destruction that had just erupted in my life. I remember looking at it, then at the t-shirt, and a strange, almost serene clarity descended upon me. It was a terrifying calm, the kind that comes when you've been pushed so far beyond your limits that something inside you just snaps. No more begging for reassurance. No more swallowing my gut instincts. No more being the irrational, jealous wife. If they had turned my private sanctuary, my home, my bedroom, into their sordid little hiding place, then I would turn it into their stage. A very public stage. The thought resonated deep within me, a cold, hard ember of fury igniting in the pit of my stomach. I wanted proof. Not just a crumpled t-shirt and an innocent child's confession, which they would undoubtedly twist and deny, just like Sergio had always done. I wanted something undeniable, irrefutable, something that would make their carefully constructed lies crumble into dust right before their eyes. The memory of Sergio's mocking laughter, his dismissive, "You're so paranoid," echoed in my ears, fueling a resolve so fierce it almost terrified me. This wasn't just about anger, it was about justice. My justice. My hands, though still trembling with the aftershocks of the revelation, moved with a newfound, almost surgical precision. First, the shared tablet. It usually sat on the kitchen counter, forgotten, mostly used by Alba for games or by Sergio for sports scores. My fingers felt stiff as I navigated to his messaging apps. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread and anticipation. I knew what I would find, but seeing their words was a different kind of pain. There it was, months of coded, flirty chats between him and Chris. Nothing explicit in the way of overt sexual acts, but the subtext was screaming, a high-pitched, deafening shriek in my mind. Pet names I didn't recognize, inside jokes about our secret times, veiled references to missing you when she's here. My stomach churned with nausea as I scrolled, each message a fresh stab. Can't wait for our movie night, counting down till she's gone. So much better without the constant chatter. The casual cruelty, the dismissal of my very existence, sliced through me. It wasn't just a physical betrayal, it was an emotional one. A complete erasure of me from their shared world. I meticulously screenshot everything, sending it to a hidden folder on my own cloud drive, my thumb pressing down with a grim determination. Then, the camera. I'd bought a tiny, discreet security camera a few months back, initially thinking of it for when Alba was home alone for short periods, but I'd never gotten around to installing it. Now, it felt like a tool delivered by fate. My hands shook as I unboxed it, the plastic cool and sterile against my skin. I found the perfect spot, a small, unassuming gap on the bookshelf in our bedroom, tucked behind a stack of old novels. It had a wide-angle lens and could stream directly to my phone. With painstaking care, I angled it just so, ensuring it had a clear, unobstructed view of the bed. The whole process felt illicit, invasive, a violation of privacy. But then, a cold voice in my head reminded me. They violated my privacy first. They turned my bedroom into a stage for their lies. This was just reclaiming the narrative. My jaw ached from clenching it so tight. The next step was harder. I had to create the opportunity. Without a word to anyone, I quietly booked another work trip for the following month. It was easy enough to fabricate. A fake email from a colleague about an urgent seminar, a few hushed phone calls from the balcony pretending to finalize travel arrangements. I went through all the usual preparations, packing my suitcase with a performance worthy of an Oscar. The usual clothes, my teaching materials, even the small, sentimental trinket Alba always put in my bag for good luck. Sergio barely glanced up from his phone when I told him the dates. "Chris will be around, don't worry," he said, that familiar, dismissive wave of his hand. It was like a punch to the gut, but I just smiled. A brittle, fake smile that felt like it might crack my face. On the morning I was supposed to leave, I said goodbye to Alba, hugging her extra tight, burying my face in her sweet-smelling hair, a wave of profound sadness washing over me for the innocence I was about to shatter. I gave Sergio a quick, almost chaste kiss on the cheek, my lips barely brushing his skin, trying not to recoil. I even waved from the taxi as it pulled away from our building, just like always. But this time, I never left Valencia. Instead, the taxi took me directly to my friend Elena's apartment, just 2 streets away. She's a fellow teacher, divorced, and understands the need for a quiet place sometimes. I gave her some vague excuse about a last-minute change of plans, a small lie to cover the monumental one I was about to expose. Her spare room felt strangely sterile, quiet in a way our apartment never was. I laid on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone clutched in my hand, my thumb hovering over the app that would connect me to the camera in my own home. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. The air was thick with a heavy, suffocating dread. I was so close, so incredibly close to seeing the truth. And a part of me, a tiny, terrified part, wished I could just turn back time, unsee the t-shirt, unhear Alba's words, and go back to being the blissfully ignorant Juliana. But that part was quickly silenced by the cold, fierce anger that burned brighter. It was time to press play. Okay, the time had come. My thumb hovered over the play button on the app, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Elena, bless her, was out getting groceries, so I was alone in the quiet apartment, the only sound the frantic thrumming of my own blood in my ears. The screen on my phone felt scorching hot against my palm, even though it was cool to the touch. I took a shaky breath, then another, and pressed play. The footage flickered to life. It was grainy, a little dark, but undeniably clear enough. My bedroom. Our bedroom. The familiar patterns of the duvet cover, the books on the nightstand, the lamp I'd picked out with such care. And then they walked in. Not sneaking, not whispering, they just walked in. Sergio, my husband, my rock, my supposed partner, followed by Chris, his best friend, Alba's Uncle Chris. They didn't even bother to fully close the door, leaving it ajar, as if daring the world to see them. Or, more accurately, as if they knew no one would see them because I was supposedly miles away. My stomach lurched, a cold wave of nausea washing over me. They sat on the edge of our bed, their body language sickeningly familiar, comfortable. Sergio was laughing, a sound that used to fill me with warmth, but now felt like a chisel chipping away at my soul. Honestly, he chuckled, his voice echoing from the tiny speaker of my phone. Juliana's so caught up with those school kids, she wouldn't notice a parade going through the apartment. Chris snorted, a low, guttural sound. Yeah, totally oblivious. How much longer till we can stop playing house and just get rid of the marriage paperwork? My breath hitched. Marriage paperwork, just like that. A bureaucratic inconvenience to be gotten rid of. Not a life, not a family, not years of shared history, just paperwork. The casual cruelty of it was a physical blow. It felt like someone had reached inside my chest and twisted my heart. I could feel the blood rushing from my head, making the edges of my vision blur. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. They continued to chat. About mundane things, about plans for the week, about a football match, all interspersed with these little venomous barbs about me. She thinks I'm working late. Sergio smirked, leaning back on the pillows, my pillows. Bless her innocent heart. Chris just laughed, and then he actually reached out and caressed Sergio's arm, a tender, intimate gesture that made my entire body seize up. It was all there. The stolen glances, the lingering touches, the private jokes, the complete and utter disregard for my existence. I wasn't just betrayed, I was erased. A phantom, a nuisance to be tolerated until they could get rid of the paperwork. Then, a small, almost imperceptible ping sounded from Sergio's phone, which was lying on the nightstand. He picked it up, glanced at it, and a wide grin spread across his face. Oh, listen to this. he said to Chris and pressed something. A voice filled the room, familiar, calm, and utterly devastating. It was his mother, my mother-in-law. Just be patient, mihijo, her voice purred, smooth as silk, yet laced with an icy certainty that turned my blood to ice. Juliana will accept whatever you decide. She always does. The words hung in the air, a final crushing blow. She always does. It wasn't just Sergio and Chris. It was a conspiracy. His own mother, the woman who had hugged me, called me her daughter, shared family meals, knew. She knew, and she approved. She was actively encouraging it. The world tilted. My vision swam. It wasn't just a betrayal by my husband and his best friend. It was a complete, systemic undoing of my entire reality. The casualness, the absolute certainty in her voice that I would just accept whatever they decided. Like I was a docile sheep, a doormat. The anger, cold and sharp, ignited into a roaring inferno. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. No, I would not accept this. Not this time. A week later, I invited everyone to Sunday lunch at our apartment, the same apartment where Sergio and Chris had spent their illicit nights. The same apartment where Alba had innocently asked her devastating question. Sergio, Chris, Sergio's mother, my sister, a couple of close friends, the whole usual crew. I had spent the week in a strange, detached haze, moving through the motions, preparing food, making small talk, all the while a cold, calculated plan solidifying in my mind. My sister Elena had been my rock, listening to my choked whispers, holding me as I finally broke down in her spare room. She didn't know the full extent of my plan, but she knew enough to be there for me. Her presence a silent, fierce support. The atmosphere that Sunday was, by all accounts, light and convivial. Too light, too normal. Sergio was his usual charming self, making jokes, doting on Alba. Chris was there, looking a little nervous, avoiding my eyes, but trying to blend in. Sergio's mother, resplendent in a new dress, held court, regaling everyone with stories. My fake smile was plastered on so tight, my jaw ached. I could barely taste the paella I'd spent hours preparing. Every laugh, every casual touch between Sergio and Chris, every word from my ML felt like a fresh cut. Halfway through dessert, when the coffee was poured and everyone was relaxed, full, and content, I cleared my throat. The sound was surprisingly steady. "Everyone," I said, my voice just a little louder than usual. "I have a surprise from my last trip." Sergio glanced up, a faint, indulgent smile on his face, probably expecting some photos of a quaint Galician village. Chris shifted uncomfortably. With hands that felt like they were made of ice, I connected my phone to the TV screen in the living room. It was an old smart TV, usually used for Netflix or Alba's cartoons. The screen flickered, then brightened, showing my phone's home screen. Then I opened the video file. Instead of scenic landscapes or cute photos of my students, the screen filled with the raw, grainy footage from our bedroom. Their faces, their laughter, their callous words about me being too busy and oblivious, Chris's joke about getting rid of the marriage paperwork. And then, the ultimate punch to the gut. Sergio's mother's calm, assured voice, playing through the TV speakers for everyone to hear. "Just be patient. Juliana will accept whatever you decide. She always does." The sound of my own voice, slightly choked, announcing the surprise still hung in the air. Then absolute, bone-chilling silence descended upon the room. It was so profound, so heavy, you could almost feel it physically pressing down. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe. The only sound, sharp and clear in the stunned, horrified quiet, was the clink of a fork, dropping onto a ceramic plate from someone's suddenly nerveless fingers. It echoed, a tiny metallic chime of doom. The silence was absolutely deafening, suffocating. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving behind a vacuum of horror and disbelief. I watched their faces one by one twisting in shock. Sergio's jaw hung open, his eyes wide and unseeing, fixed on the screen where his mother's voice still echoed the words, "Juliana will accept whatever you decide. She always does." Chris had gone pale, his usual cocky smirk replaced by a mask of sheer terror. His mother, my ML, looked like she'd been slapped. Her carefully composed facade crumbling into 1,000 pieces, her eyes darting between me and her son. My sister, bless her, looked heartbroken but also fiercely, protectively angry. Our friends just sat there, frozen, their dessert forks still in their hands, their eyes wide with a mixture of pity and shock. And as I watched their faces, saw the raw, exposed ugliness of their deceit thrown back at them, a part of me, a tiny buried part, felt cruel, invasive. My hands, which had literally shaken the entire time I planned this, from installing the camera to hitting play, started trembling again. But this time it wasn't just anger. It was a cold, uneasy tremor of self-doubt. Had I gone too far? Was this too brutal? My stomach churned, a familiar wave of nausea washing over me. This was so public, so utterly devastating. The thought, "Am I the asshole for this?" screamed in my head, a jarring counterpoint to the raging inferno of my justifiable anger. For a moment, just a fleeting, agonizing moment, I was transported back to all those times Sergio had dismissed me. His rolling eyes, the mocking laugh, the venomous word, irrational. "Are you jealous of Chris, seriously?" His voice, dripping with contempt, echoed in my mind, making my chest tighten with the old, familiar shame. He had painted me as the hysterical wife, the paranoid woman imagining things. And now I had not only confirmed those imagined things, but I had broadcasted them to everyone we knew. The sheer scale of my revenge felt overwhelming, almost monstrous. I knew, with absolute, terrifying certainty, that once I had the proof and exposed it like this, there was no going back. No going back to the comfortable lie of our normal little family. No possibility of a quiet, dignified separation. This was a nuclear option, and I had just detonated it. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. What had I done? My daughter was in the next room playing. How would this affect her? The weight of it pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. But then, just as that doubt threatened to consume me, I heard it again, not from the TV, but from the echoing chamber of my memory. Sergio's mother's voice, calm, assured. "Juliana will accept whatever you decide. She always does." That chilling certainty, that absolute, unwavering belief that I was so docile, so easily manipulated, so utterly insignificant that I would simply accept their betrayal, that I would quietly pack my bags or silently endure their continued secret game in my own bed, that I would just take it. And I remembered every single time I had swallowed my instincts, every time I had been made to feel foolish for a gut feeling, every time I had quieted the small, insistent voice of my own intuition because Sergio, and apparently his mother, deemed me irrational. It was like a switch flipped inside me. The flicker of doubt, the unease, the fleeting feeling of cruelty, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. This wasn't cruel. This was necessary. This was the only way they would ever truly understand the depth of their transgression. This was the only way to shatter their illusion of control over me. Sergio, finally snapping out of his stupor, lunged. He scrambled across the floor, knocking over his chair with a crash, his face a mask of panicked fury. He made a desperate grab for the remote control, which was lying on the coffee table, his eyes wide with a frantic need to shut it off, to make it unhappen. But I let him. I just stood there, watching him, my face impassive. He fumbled with the remote, frantically pressing buttons until the screen finally went black. The sudden darkness in the living room felt profound, heavy. But it was too late. The damage was done. The truth was out. There was no unseeing it, no unhearing it. The images, the words, his mother's chilling voice, they were burned into everyone's minds, an indelible stain on the fabric of our perfect life. And in that black silence, as Sergio stood panting, clutching the remote like a lifeline, I knew, with absolute clarity, that I had done the right thing. My perfect family was a lie. And I had just broadcasted the truth on live TV. The TV screen went black, plunging the living room into a suffocating silence. Sergio stood there panting, clutching the remote, his face a contorted mess of fury and despair. Chris, frozen in his chair, looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. His mother, my Mill, finally broke the quiet, a strangled sound. "Sergio, what have you done?" But it wasn't about him. It was about my actions. Then my sister, Elena, moved. She stood up slowly, deliberately, her eyes blazing. She walked to Sergio, her voice low, steady, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Sergio," she cut through the air. "Get out of her apartment. Now." No shouting, just those 3 words delivered with a dangerous calm. He flinched, opened his mouth, but Elena just stared him down. He dropped the remote and stumbled out, Chris scurrying after him like a terrified shadow. The front door slammed shut. Our friends, bless their stunned hearts, mumbled apologies and awkward goodbyes, melting away. My Mill, however, remained, starting to babble about family matters, but I just looked at her. Elena, sensing my exhaustion, gently but firmly ushered her out too. The apartment finally fell silent, a profound, aching quiet. Chris vanished a few days later. No note, no explanation, just gone. His nearby flat stood dark and empty. I heard through a mutual friend he'd packed up overnight and left Valencia, presumably to avoid the gossip and shame. Good riddance. I filed for divorce immediately. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman Elena recommended, practically salivated when I presented her with the camera recordings and the meticulously screenshotted chat logs. "This," she'd said, eyes gleaming, "is open and shut, Juliana. We have him." Hearing those words, seeing the irrefutable evidence, felt like a heavy weight finally lifting, even as the pain remained raw. It was empowering. And Sergio's mother. Oh, his mother. She had always had something subtly critical to say about my work. Traveling again? Don't you think Alba needs her mother at home more often? She'd even called me after the incident, demanding to know how I could destroy her son's reputation. But her smugness evaporated, her voice suddenly very quiet. When my lawyer calmly mentioned grandparents' visitation rights and the potential for undue influence on Alba, given the recorded evidence of her active participation in the deception. The implication that her words could be used against her in court silenced her completely. She hasn't called since. A small, hollow victory, but a victory. I used to believe betrayal came with neon signs and lipstick on collars. Turns out it came as 2 men whispering secrets and sharing ice cream in my bed, and a little girl's innocent question. It came in a dismissive laugh and a Emile's chilling certainty. My perfect family wasn't destroyed by me. They already had. I just pressed play. Now I'm left to pick up the pieces, raising my daughter in a world where her father's betrayal is an undeniable reality. Alba, bless her heart, is confused, asking why Daddy moved out and why Uncle Chris doesn't visit. I'm trying to navigate it gently, telling her that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, really big ones, but that she is loved, always. The ache in my chest is constant, a dull, throbbing pain. Reddit, I need to know. Was I wrong for the way I exposed them? Am I the asshole for not confronting them privately first, and instead choosing to reveal everything so publicly, so dramatically? Part of me feels a deep, satisfying justice, but another part wonders if I crossed a line, if the public humiliation was too much. And more importantly, what do I do now to help my daughter navigate this? How do I explain this kind of betrayal to a child without poisoning her view of love and trust forever? I'm so lost.